Hey there, Michael here. I hope you had a very happy Easter. And while I'm now trying to tell you what the issue with the remaining physical issues with the shoulder buttons are, so that you will hopefully be able to fix them, let's first start with the Pandora case. So this is the old one. You can see here's the screw peg and there's the surrounding. The surrounding, which is in the 3D data of the Pyra 3D data, but it's not inside the mold. And you can see there's a peg, a small one. Here's a small supporting ring, basically, and yeah, that's on all the pegs for the screw holes. Well, and there's a reason for that. So usually, you've got this part, and then the key mat comes in, and then the PCB is put on top. Yeah, and now here's the reason the pegs are there for the Pandora. The key mat is exactly 1 millimeter thick, and as you can see, as soon as you put it in, it has the exact same height as the supporting ring around the peg here. This is of course the same for all of them. So the difference from basically this area where the key mat is being put in to this one is exactly 1 millimeter, because the key mat is 1 millimeter thick. The reason for that is, as you can see, the key mat is flexible. And of course, it's made of rubber. So if the PCB is put on top here, the key mat itself will not support it, but those rings will. I will show you an example for that. If I simply remove the key mat and put the Pandora PCB in here, it sits exactly on these rings. Which means I can press from the lower side, or yeah, I can maybe show you this like this. I can press as much as I want. The PCB does not move, so the shoulder button stays exactly in place. The same, of course, here on the other side. So it's supported. Same here. Simply because it sits. It sits on this outer ring. This is why the PCB has support and doesn't move a bit if you push it from the behind. So the shoulder button is exactly in the position where it should be. It cannot move up and down, it simply does fit. So let's take a look on the other side. This is the Pandora backside, and you've got the supporters for the screw holes here. And if I put the PCB on top of here, it sits perfectly. I can push as much as I want. The PCB is being supported by these pegs. Same on all sides, of course. So in combination, that means the PCB has also always the same thickness. It means it cannot, if it's assembled properly, move up or down in any direction, because it's supported from both sides. It's supported from the lower side, and it's supported by the upper side by these pegs. So even without a key mat, the PCB does not move up and down, not even 1 millimeter, not even half a millimeter. This can easily be seen if I remove the shoulder button. I can try, let me see how I can do it so you can see it as well. I can use the screwdriver, try to push it up or down. It does not move. Now let's take a look at Pyra's case. It doesn't have these surrounding rings. It has them in the 3D data and in all of my 3D printed cases, which is why these worked well until Formaction started to create the mold. Which means the PCB will not be supported where it should be. So if I put in this PCB, you can see, yeah, it's not sitting well. It moves up and down quite a bit. That's at least half a millimeter. And this is a really issue here because, yeah, the space for pressing the shoulder button is so small, if it just moves up and down 0.5 millimeter, it will miss. So that's the first issue. Now let's put in a key mat as it's supposed to be. The key mat will add this 1 millimeter as suggested, but the problem is it's soft. So if I put in the PCB including the key mat, you can see it's still not fixed. It's even worse because the key mat is so soft it can now move up and down at least 1 millimeter. And this will not work. That's because there's no support on any of these edges, and the key mat of course is soft. And you can see it here on the pack. I can push this down. And this is exactly what should not happen. Here's the Pandora part with the key mat in. Let's put it in. And of course, because there are surrounding packs, I cannot move it up and down. So let's take a look at the Pyra case. There are no supporting packs here for the PCB, which is not that bad because we can put we want to put a metal plate in between there, so that the metal plate keeps the battery cool and also acts as the supporting packs between the PCB and the case. So this should be fine, but these need to be exactly in the correct height to support the PCB. Let's take a look at this. So here's the case, here's the PCB. Let's put it in properly. The lower one, no. I can still push it down here. Here is the pack where it's supposed to sit on. And now it's properly put in, as you can see here with the HDMI port. But if I push it down, you can see how it moves. So yeah, it's definitely not sitting on this pack as it should be, otherwise I would not be able to move it down. So here's the upper part, here's the key mat, here's the PCB, here's the other side. Let's assemble it. And what's the result? It can move a bit up, which is not that bad. But if I try to push it down from here, yeah, you can see how it moves already. So yeah, it should not move like that. The PCB is not sitting properly in there, which is one of the issues. Now let's take at another issue I found. Now we already know that the PCB is moving around. Let's take a look at the shoulder buttons. Let's put them in. Are these sitting properly? Well, let's close the case and take a look at this. Yeah, the shoulder button itself can also move up and down quite a lot. That's the reason Form Action created these little rings. They will be put on here, and the shoulder button is being put on top, which of course means there's a spacer in between there, and well, the shoulder button still can move around. So yeah, that one ring is definitely not enough. So there's a second. Let's put in a third as well. So you now got 3 of these rings stacked on top. Let's put on back the shoulder button, put the case together. Okay, that's too much. So let's try 2. Yeah, 2 works. Now it can't move up and down anymore, which is what should be the case. So the shoulder buttons are also moving up and down. This, of course, in combination with the PCB moving up and down will cause an issue. Let's take a look here. First, let's only take a look at the lower shoulder button. It's now in without anything else in between. Let's put it in here. Yeah, it doesn't really work. So why does it not work properly? Well, simple. If the case is not sitting properly, then the shoulder button will not press on the button, but on the PCB. So as the PCB can move up and down, chances are that it will not be pressed by the shoulder button, but that the shoulder button is being stuck at the PCB. This is exactly what happens if I put the shoulder button in properly and I push the PCB in position where it should be. Yeah, it doesn't really work. Yeah, that's one of the issues. Then of course the same happens if you put the other one on top. If this one goes too far down, it also won't press the button. So at the moment, it works fine. But if the PCB is not pushed down properly or doesn't sit properly, then this shoulder button will also hit the PCB and won't work anymore. So yeah, thanks to the PCB not sitting properly and the shoulder buttons being able to move up and down, unless you put in two of these little rings, then the shoulder buttons will not properly work. They will only work if the PCB is by chance sitting properly. So just turn the screw around a bit further or loosen it a bit and it will stop working or will work. So this is the biggest problem we have right now. Another problem is also that these shoulder buttons, the tolerances for the moving is very, very, very little. The buttons almost sit at the same position, but of course they can also move a bit up and down. So yeah, that's also something that might be something we need to experiment with. But right now, as you can see, this shoulder button, yeah, it doesn't work properly because it doesn't reach the button, it touches the PCB. So let's try and assemble it with two of these spacers in between. Okay, now this means it's too far up. It will not press the button, but it will press it if it's just a bit further up. So yeah, problem is it's not being supported by these pegs, so we don't know where the PCB is sitting properly. So let's try to fully assemble it with the shoulder button. First this. Then the PCB. Next, of course, we've got the shoulder button here. Form Action decided to use one spacer and put in the shoulder button on here. And assemble it. Does it work? No, does not press. But of course it's wiggling around. The lower one, well, it does press a bit, but it also doesn't work that well. So yeah, if I push, depending on how much I push the case together, it will work or it will not work. So it depends on how tight it's screwed together. So to fix this, we need to do the following, in my opinion. The first thing, of course, is to add the supporting pegs around, or at least in one side of these, so that the PCB is sitting properly on top of them and cannot move around. Of course, this is where these are where the key mat sits on. So the supporting pegs need to be exactly 1 millimeter higher than these, because the key mat has exactly 1 millimeter. And if you put in the key mat and you've got the supporting pegs 1 millimeter higher than the area where the key mat sits on, then you've got the proper space. That's the first step, to add these. Now the second step is find out the proper height for these ones. Basically it's pretty simple. As said, we've got 1 millimeter for the supporting pegs here. Then you know exactly where the PCB is going to sit. Then the PCB has also an exact thickness. You can measure it, but I think it should be 1 millimeter or 1.2 millimeters, something like that. I forgot which the standard is, but I can ask. So it's 1 millimeter. So the difference, basically the space between the lower and the supporting pack here should be exactly 1 millimeter, because, or 1.2 millimeter, depending on the thickness. So it needs to be exactly, then there needs to be exactly that much space so that the PCB will fit exactly in between. This will make the PCB sit exactly where it should be. It cannot wiggle up and down because it is being supported on the one side by these packs and on the other side by these. And if the space between this and the supporting packs is exactly the thickness of the PCB, then it will sit where it should be, exactly in place. This is the first thing, to make the PCB sit exactly where it should be. And then the next step is fitting the shoulder buttons, which should also be easy, because once you put in that shoulder button, you need to be sure that this area where it pushes on the button is slightly below the PCB so that it does not hit the PCB, and it should hit the button. But as the PCB can't move anymore up and down, the position is very exact and you can fit this. Once this has happened, we can start to tweak the shoulder buttons, for example, make this a little bit longer or shorter, or to make them move a bit more up and down so that they feel better. This is just, well, trying to find out the perfect sweet spot to make them feel good. The spring already improves everything because it automatically moves up again, but it still needs to have that exact sweet spot to feel good. But the first important thing, of course, is that this is able to push the button at all. As long as it cannot push the button because it moves up and down, it won't work. After that, of course, the second shoulder button needs to be fit or fixed. And it needs to be fixed that it cannot move up and down. So instead of adding 1 or 2 spaces here, I have no idea why Form Action didn't do this, but just make this surrounding a bit longer, which will have the same effect as adding a spacer here, so that it will not move up and down anymore, but sit exactly in the case. And then, of course, this area needs to be fixed again to make the shoulder, to make it possible to reach the shoulder button and to press it properly. This will again work because the PCB will not be able to move up and down, and the shoulder button can be fixed properly.